A big thank you to Rabbi Jack and Shira. It's so nice to see you and your beautiful family again, and nice to be with you here in LA. A few words about me, so you know who you're going to be listening to for the next little while. My name is Doron, born and raised in Montreal, Canada. When I graduated university, I made Aliyah. I've been living in Israel for 30 years. You can tell it's been a while. Married an American girl. We live in what we call Little America, also known as Ramat Beit Shemesh. If you know, a lot of Americans have moved there. My kids are all born and raised in Israel, 2 in the army right now, they're in university, and well, you know the rest. And what I do is kind of interesting, I think, is that I specialize in a few different subjects. And over the years, I've really thought a lot about and written about, and one of them is relationships. And I want to share with you some ideas on the subject. But first I want to test your musical knowledge. Well, actually more your taste. Raise your hand if you like the Beatles, if you like Beatles music. Okay, anybody who did not raise your hand, you can leave. Sorry. I grew up on the Beatles. I'm amazed, by the way, that I still, when I travel, I go into airports, whatever, you still hear the Beatles on the radio. Like, it's amazing. I mean, it's 50 years old. I mean, it's amazing. I have one favorite Beatles song. Everybody has their own. I'll do the words, you do the music, okay? All you need is love. Everybody knows it, right? You've all heard it. It's a funny song, not considered by musicologists to be their best. I disagree, but that's a personal thing. In Hebrew, we say, "Betam b'vreich ein livakaach," right? No arguing about taste. So I want to think about that phrase. I'm going to use the Beatles song, All You Need Is Love, as just an example of a theme. It's not just the Beatles. That concept is everywhere. Our literature, movies, books, for hundreds of years at least. That all you need is love is all you need, love conquers all. Every language has phrases like that. I just want to think about it for a second. So in order to do that, forget about Jews for a minute. Forget about Ishlit, forget about LA, forget about everything. Just imagine a typical church wedding in middle America. Bride and groom are, going down the aisle. They're in the church. The priest, the minister, is at the front of the altar. These people are going to get married in 5 minutes. Music is playing on the organ. Do, 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 do. You've all seen it in the movies, right? What percentage of people, as they walk down the aisle, love the person they're going to marry? I'm going to marry this person in 5 minutes. Do I love them? What percentage? I actually was speaking in University of Virginia once, and I'll never forget it. And I asked this question: what percentage of people love the person they're going to marry in 5 minutes? A student in the back raised his hand, very angry look on his face, and he said, 10% maximum. I was like, whoa. I mean, like, I know it's not like the deepest level of love. I get it, okay? But you're usually in love when you get married, right? I've been married for 27 years. Come on, guys, give me some love. I mean, it's not, come on. And I love my wife now much more than I did 27 years ago. Aw, come on. But shouldn't it be that way? In a healthy, normal relationship, shouldn't it be that way? I would hope so. Again, whenever I hear people say, oh, my wedding day was the happiest day of my life, that scares me. The most exciting day of your life, maybe. But that's the happiest day? It's a little, depends what they mean, obviously. But I hope your love is getting deeper and as you go through life together. But I assume that 99%, 100%, 90% of people are in love when they get married, right? That's fact number one. Fact number one, almost everybody is in love when they get married. Fact number two, you tell me, what is the divorce rate today in the USA, or in the West? Roughly 50%. It depends a little bit how you count. The numbers have been going up. They're not going up tremendously. They kind of plateaued between 50 and 55, depending how you count. By the way, that number is very deceptive because it depends a lot on if your parents stayed married or got divorced. It depends on socioeconomic background. It depends on first marriage, second marriage. By the way, we would think that second marriage would have better success rates than first marriage. You've been there, you've done that. It's actually the opposite. But still, overall, the general number that's accepted by most people in most situations, roughly 50% of new marriages end in divorce. Anybody know how long it takes for the typical divorce to happen? Well, Exactly right. Under 5, right? Doesn't mean they're all finalized divorced by then, but the serious problems start quick, usually within. There are people who get divorced after 20 years. It happens. We all know people, right? Statistically rare. Usually, right? You know, if you remember, like in baseball, there used to be this thing like the 7-inning stretch, right? So it used to be in marriages was a 7-year itch, that if you made it past 7 years, statistically, very high likelihood of staying married. Now it's less than 5, right? So let's just think about those two facts. Fact number 1, almost everybody's in love when they get married. Fact number 2, massive divorce rate, and it happens quick. And by the way, just to add in, we'll get to questions and comments after, we'll just get some ideas on the table, okay? To add in, we all know there's plenty of people out there that stay married, but their marriages are, so it's kind of depressing when you think about it. They're all in love when they get married, and within only a few years, massive marital dysfunction in the world today. So the question is why? Why are there so many problems? And the truth is, there's a lot of literature on the subject. We know more about relationships, about marriage now, 2025, than ever in history. Whenever I come, I live in Israel. Whenever I come to the States a few times a year teaching, then I go into a Barnes & Noble. The biggest section in the bookstores is relationships and marriage. The biggest subject, right? You can get more information in 5 minutes on your phone than any time in history. And from the sound of it, from what we know, it seems that marriages are in worse shape than ever in history. Now, to be honest, we don't know that for sure, because it's hard to go back in history and say what were marriages really like 500 years ago, right? But from what we know, at least in the last couple hundred years, like, we're in a really bad situation. And there's a lot of literature as to why. You could do a PhD, you could read, I want to save you all the trouble. I want to explain to you now why so many relationships are struggling. And I think the answer is actually quite simple. It's because the Beatles were wrong. They were great musicians, certainly Paul and John. Even George Harrison proved himself when he went solo, My Sweet Love. Ringo Starr, I'm still not sure why he was in the band. But the point is, the Beatles had great music, but their marital advice was simply not true. By the way, I Googled, and each and every one of the Beatles was divorced at least once. So music, yes. Marriage advice, I'm not so sure. Of course you need love. And of course you deserve love. And it's crucial, that's that key beautiful ingredient. And if all they were singing about was college romance or just the first year or two of marriage, then they were right. All you need is love. It's that special feeling. It finesses everything. Everything else works great. But if they were talking about life itself, about a long-term successful relationship, it's simply not true. We just proved it in 5 minutes, right? They're all in love when they get married. And within 5 years, huge percentage are having serious marital problems. Because love is not all you need. You do need it. You do deserve it. You will have it, 100%. But it's not all you need. What else do you need? Well, some of the things are obvious. You don't need me to come and give you a talk about it. Any book on the subject talks. Trust, communication, listening. I mean, those are obvious things that you have to develop, those skills, and have that relationship. So those two things are obvious. You need love, deserve love. Trust, listening, communication. Those are all clear. There's two other things that are not so obvious, that are not so clear, that I find are missing, so often missing in the conversation. And I want to share my thoughts on the subject, my conclusions. I'm going to move quickly because I want to leave time for you to have questions and comments and your share. Two core concepts that are often missing from the conversation that can make a real difference. There's no guarantees in life. You can do everything right and things don't work. But you can radically change the chances of you having a successful relationship. These two things are key to that. First element, again, these are what I call the two secrets, the two things that are not talked about that I want to share with you. Number one, the first secret. I came across this idea. I'll tell you exactly when I came across this idea. I was newly married. I was living in Jerusalem. I mentioned that after university, I made Aliyah. I was studying in Jerusalem, learning in yeshiva for many years. And I spent a couple years learning at a big Israeli yeshiva. It's called Teres Yisrael. The rabbi, he's since passed. His name was Rabbi Walken. And he gave I got to know him in the late 1990s. And he was older. He's since passed. And he shared the following idea, and it stuck with me incredibly. He said, you know when you're flying in an airplane, and the airplane has a flying altitude, 35,000 feet or whatever they say, right? Sometimes the airplane flies above that flying altitude. Sometimes it flies below that flying altitude. But most of the time, on most flights, the airplane is flying at its average normal flying altitude. And he told us, he said, every human being needs a flying altitude as well. And that flying altitude is happy. Sometimes you are above that flying altitude. You are dancing and singing and celebrating, and it's a party, and it's great. Sometimes you are below that flying altitude. Life sends us challenges, and we're not always going to be happy. It's normal to have downtimes as well. But ask yourself the following question. This is what he asked us. And I'll tell you honestly, now that we're friends, it got me right here and it changed my life when he asked us this question. He said, ask yourself the following question. Most of the day, on most days, are you happy? When he asked me this question 26 years ago, I had like an epiphany. It was like, oh my gosh. The answer is no. Not even close. A couple hours a day, evenings, not working, studying, whatever, weekends, Shabbat, I'm happy sometimes. But most of the day, on most days, and what he explained later was that, so you're going to go through life, and most of your life you're not going to be happy. That's what you're telling me. This is the first secret of relationships. The first secret of marriages. It's my personal pet peeve. Every book I open on the subject, and I read a lot of them, they're always missing the first chapter. They immediately, a book on relationships, they start talking about relationships. That's a mistake, ladies and gentlemen. The most important thing that you can do to make a relationship successful has nothing to do with relationships. It has to do with me, with you. Let me put it into other words. The happier a person you are, the happier a marriage you are likely to have. I know there's another person involved. I know there's no guarantees, but it's still true. In another way of saying the same thing, I'll put it in the negative, just to make a point. If you are unhappy when you're single, you will be unhappy when you are married. We are sold a bill of goods in the Western world that is a terrible mistake. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's subconscious. When I get married, I'll be happy. When somebody loves me, I'll be happy. When I have a family, I'll be happy. It's all not true. The only person that can make you happy is you. The only thing that can make you happy is you. If this sounds depressing, it is not. It is the most empowering, positive idea that I ever heard in my life. Think about it for a second. If my happiness is not dependent on anyone or anything outside, it means I can do it myself. And you can. I'm going to tell you exactly how. But first understand the principle, the yesod, as we say in Hebrew, right? The foundation principle. The happier person I am, the happier marriage I'm likely to have. The other person reflects it. Usually there's exceptions, but usually it's a huge reflection. It works for giving. The kinder a person you are, the calmer. If you're angry, it's going to come into your marriage. If you're impatient, it's going to come into your marriage. So the question is, how do I change myself? How do I make myself a happier person? Because it's going to have a huge effect. I'm going to offer you now a 4-step program. You can ignore the program. You can ignore any of the steps you want. You can do your own program, that's fine, doesn't matter. You don't have to use mine. But you have to have a program. And I'm just going to give you an example of one that works. I call my system, the eggs system. This is a way to make yourself happier. No guarantees. We'll all have ups and downs, but it's unbelievable. E, eggs, like the food, EGGS. E, exercise. The studies are unbelievable. If you need meds, if you need therapy, join the club. We've all been there. It's fine. Studies are amazing, though. For 90% of people, not talking massive manic depression, for most of us, regular exercise has a bigger effect on brain health and positivity than meds and therapy combined. This is not me saying it. Everyone says it. There's no study that doesn't say it. Start moving. I'm not a natural athlete. You don't need to be a natural athlete. You start moving. I'm not even talking about physical health. I'm talking about brain health. It puts you in a better state of mind. You become a happier person. Obviously, sleeping well and eating healthy, but exercise. That's the first E, right? Just gets you moving. By the way, without moving your body, it's hard to actually be in a good mood. Notice it in yourselves. G, giving. Become a more giving person. Incredible study, Harvard Business Review a number of years ago. If you have $100 extra money, I'm not talking that you need it for your daily life, just completely extra money comes to you. What do I do with my extra $100? Either I can just buy something, fun, whatever, that I don't need, never really thought about, but it's just for me, some extra present. Or I can give the money to somebody who needs it or to an organization that needs it. To Schlitt. They didn't ask me to say that. Harvard Business Review studied it very carefully. You know which is going to bring me more happiness? Never mind helping the other. Giving it away. It taps into when we help others, it taps into a part of us. It makes us happier. Exercise, giving. The next G, gratitude. Tell you personally what I do. I go to a synagogue, I try to go to synagogue every morning. I walk across a park. It's about a 10-minute walk. As I go, I just thank God for 3 things. It's neuroplasticity. You're creating channels in your brain. You just become a more thankful, gratitude-filled person. It changed my life. Unbelievable. Sometimes these things are small things. I got up in the morning. I paid my bills, whatever it's going to be. Sometimes there's like a really big thing. For those of you who remember, the first few weeks after October 7th, it was chaos in the country, in Israel. I have 2 sons in the army. My older one, my younger one was not in the army yet. My older one, he's an officer in a combat unit. We didn't hear from him for 3 weeks. That wasn't just me. Nobody heard from anybody. You weren't allowed phones in Gaza for the first 2.5, 3 weeks. So when we got that phone call that he's okay, thank you. So sometimes they're big things. Doesn't matter. They can overlap, whatever. It sounds stupid. It sounds small. Physically saying the words. Some people write them down. You can have a gratitude journal. You can collect jelly beans. Do it your own way. It doesn't matter. But there's so much negativity in the world. Just training your brain. It's life-changing. Exercise, giving, gratitude. S, it's what you're doing here. Spirituality. Developing a spiritual side is so key. Carl Jung, famous, one of the fathers of psychology, he was not mentioned for many, many years, and then Jordan Peterson keeps quoting him, so he brought him back into modern parlance, if you like Jordan Peterson or not, but one of the famous, Jungian, the major. So he said that he has never found someone that developed a positive, healthy mental state, healthy life, that didn't have a spiritual development, spiritual side of life. To be very clear, religion and spirituality are not identical. Judaism has a very beautiful way of expressing what they both mean. The Talmud says that the human being is like a body. You have bones, the skeleton, and the flesh. And that's what the human being is. And he said that's what the Torah is. Right? You have the laws, the structure, that's the skeleton. And then there's what in the Gemara is called agadata. It's the philosophy, the stories, the inspiration, the mysticism, right? And that's the meat, the flesh. So if you just have the bones, you just have the laws with no inspiration, then it's like a dead bone. It's just like a skeleton, right? But if you just have the inspiration, the fluff, the inspiration with no structure, it just falls down. It doesn't last. You need both, right? Developing a spiritual side. I had a few hours off. I've been in LA for a few days. So I went up to, this is, I don't know if you guys even bother, it's a tourist thing. I went up to Griffith Park, walked up the hills. It was half an hour to get there, less. You're in the middle of the city, just nature, it's unbelievable. You find your own, go to the beach, prayer, study. Everybody has their own paths in. But open up that part of yourself, it leads to happier lives. Again, you can ignore my method, forget the word, but develop your own method. Happiness does not happen automatically. You have to choose that I want to be happier, and this is how I'm going to do it. You ever hear this phrase? You hear it a lot in physical training, but it's elsewhere, that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I hate that phrase. It's not true. It's simply not true. It's a dangerous phrase. Walk around LA a little bit. You notice all the broken people in the West today? They've had plenty of things thrown at them in life. Didn't break them, didn't kill them, but they're not stronger. It's not automatic that difficulties make you stronger. You got to grow from them. You got to learn from them, right? So be proactive. That's the first secret. The first secret, remember, my premise is there's something missing from the modern conversations about relationships. That's why. Everybody's in love, but they don't last very often. So what do you need? You need love, deserve love, will have love, definitely. Trust, communication, those are obvious. I'm adding two things to the conversation. These two things, the first one, what I call owning your own happiness. If you're unhappy when you're single, you will be unhappy when you're married. But you don't have to be. Take ownership of your own inner lives. Make yourself into happier people. The egg system, laugh at it, ignore it, develop your own, but develop a system. Prioritize what's going to work, what helps me. Everybody has their own path. That's number one. Number two, let's get to the other secret, and then we're going to open it up for your thoughts. I heard a story many years ago, based on a true story, of this new lawyer that gets hired into a prestigious law firm in Manhattan. Comes straight out of Harvard Law, gets hired. As he walks into the office, the ladies notice him immediately. Good-looking guy, dresses well, straight out of Harvard Law. And the ladies in the office, female lawyers, secretaries, talking about him. See the new lawyer, what do you think of the new lawyer? Good-looking. One woman is particularly attracted to him. And she mentions it to a friend, and the friend says, what are you waiting for? It's 21st century, you're a successful lawyer, go for it. So she decides, why not? Goes up to him, introduces herself, gets to talking. She's even more interested. Next day, there's a company, the senior lawyers, the junior lawyers are all seated around a conference room table, and you have this good-looking guy sitting by himself, seats open on each side, right? And she's thinking, should I, shouldn't I? And her friend elbows her into the seat. She sits beside him. She's even more interested. Next day, she sees him going down the hallway, going to get a cup of coffee, and she's thinking, you know what, if I'm going to go for it, might as well go for it. So she goes up to him, mentions that she has an extra ticket to a show, basically asking him out on a date. He's busy that night, he can't go. So I have a question for the ladies only. Guys, you are not allowed to answer this question. Ladies, she does not want to give up just yet. She's interested. But she doesn't want to keep being forward. It was kind of, she tried that, didn't work. What is plan B? Ladies only. Stalking is not an option. What else can she do? Back off, play hard to get, exactly. Maybe he doesn't, he's more traditional and wants to make the first move. So she waits a few days, nothing happens, waits another few days. She tried being forward, it didn't work. Tried playing hard to get, didn't work. What else can she do, ladies?
Be his friend.
So she be his friend, let's develop a connection that way. Very good. In this story, she actually didn't, but it's a good idea. Anybody else? So some people have suggested to me over the years that she should try and make him jealous. Talk to other men in his presence, send herself flowers, whatever. So what she decided to do was to actually send a friend. The friend's job was to get information, figure out, what's going on. She senses there's something there, but she doesn't know, is he secretly dating somebody that we don't know about? Is he straight? Is he gay? Ask all the questions that need to be asked. So the friend goes digging for information. The new lawyer, the Harvard grad, knows exactly what the friend is asking. And he says something fascinating. Before I tell you what he said, I should tell you one more fact about him. I told you he was good-looking, successful, smart. I should also mention he's African-American. And she's a white girl. Some women like tall guys, short guys, fat. She likes black guys. So go back to the story, based on a true story. She tried going after him, didn't work. Tried playing hard to get, didn't work. She sends the friend. This is what he says to the friend. I'm sorry, I'm sure she's very nice, but I don't date white women. This is the 21st century in New York City. You can't just say that anymore. And there's an uproar in the office. He's the newest person on staff, and suddenly he's in trouble. People are complaining, people are talking. One person is so offended to go right up to this new lawyer and say, you're racist. We whites have come a long way. We're finally willing to date and marry you, and now you're not willing to date and marry us. That's reverse racism. Others say there's no such thing as reverse racism. It's a whole, he's like the most unpopular person on staff. He just arrived, So he realizes he's got to diffuse the situation, and he does. He goes up to the friend, he says, listen, I'm very sorry, I didn't phrase it correctly. What I really mean is, I'm very into my African-American heritage. I read the literature, I'm involved in the political movements. This is a big part of my identity. And I only want to date and marry somebody that can fully share who I am, several years ago. Now for you, raise your hand if you think he's being racist. No one? We agree? Okay, thank you, because if all Jews agree on something, we know there's a problem. So the truth is, there's no doubt that he's being racial, right? He is dividing between races. In my opinion, agree or disagree, everything's good, right? In my opinion, I agree with most of you that I didn't actually hear anything racist in what he said. The way that we use the word racist, it's a negative. I'm up here, you're down here. I don't want to be friends with you because you're lower than me. I don't want to work with you because you're lower than me. And in the story, based on a true story, he was just saying this is for me. You can agree or disagree with the lawyer, say it's his own personal business. It actually has nothing to do with us, I should mention. Just so you're clear, okay? So we're all clear. Jews and Judaism have no problem whatsoever with different races and cultures dating and marrying. None. When my German Jewish grandfather started dating my Russian Jewish grandmother, it was World War III between the families. It's actually before World War II, but it was a World War. Why? Because the German Jews thought the Russian Jews were uneducated peasants. The Russian Jews thought the German Jews were assimilated, acted like non-Jews. It was, do you realize, like, even in Israel today, Ashkenazi, Sephardi weddings aren't even noticed? It's not even a thing. 50 years ago it was, right? We're way past, in my neighborhood, I'm friendly with 3 couples, biracial, right? One partner is Ethiopian, married to a white Ashkenazi, 2 other African-American converts. This is like every day, no problem whatsoever. So why do I mention this story? Because it introduces us to a crucial element that we don't talk about, we're embarrassed to talk about. The idea, the priority of marrying someone else from the same religious background. Even people who intuitively feel, I'd like to marry somebody Jewish, which, let's face it, is probably part of the motivation for many of you here tonight and many of the reasons why young people are involved. I get it. I did it too. I get it, right? But we're embarrassed to talk about it. And when push comes to shove, a couple years down the road, if you haven't met the right person, people get lonely. And ideals, so I want to explain now why this is so important. Not negative about anybody. I'm on record. I encourage Muslims to marry Muslims, Hindus to marry Hindus, Catholics to marry Catholics, and Jews to marry Jews. Whether you're more observant, less observant, atheist, agnostic, doesn't matter. Just the idea of marrying somebody from the same religious background. To be very clear, statistically speaking, many of you are probably A, have a non-Jewish parent, B, have a brother or sister married to a non-Jew, C, you're presently involved romantically with somebody who isn't Jewish, or D, all of the above. I'm not judging anybody. It's America. Let's just get some information to think about, okay? Like this. Can I have a volunteer? I want to explain a concept. Somebody tall. You're perfect. What's your first name?
Calvin.
Calvin? Kelvin or Calvin?
Calvin.
Calvin. Okay, thank you so much. Round of applause for our first volunteer. Calvin, stand right here. Okay, what I want you to do is put your right hand straight up to the ceiling and your left hand out horizontal. Calvin is now representing something. Anybody know what he's trying to represent? Very good. Very good. What else? What'd you say? Somebody said? No?
I said L for Los Angeles.
L for Los Angeles. What else could the L stand for? Come on. Love. You didn't hear that. They didn't say loser. Don't worry. Okay, you said loser. Okay. Okay. Anybody else know what Calvin's trying to represent? Lakers. Good. What? Religions? We'll get there soon. Liberal. No, forget about someone once said to me, that's Jesus on the cross. And I was like, have you ever seen Jesus? True was a Jewish boy up there, but some say it's like 12:15 on a clock. There's all kinds of psychology. But one of you said it right away. Calvin, this is a graph. This is what I call the timeline of religious and cultural involvement. How involved people are, how connected and involved people are in their religion, culture, heritage as they go through life. Low involvement, middle involvement, high involvement, birth 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, all the way till death. Let's take some examples and then we'll get into the core concept. Hypothetical examples. Baby is born in the hospital. Mother looks down at the child. She has very mixed emotions. You're doing okay up there? Oh, excellent. Okay. Kevin's face just gives us something nice to look at while we do the exercise, okay? There you go. Good one, first time. Mother looks down at the child and she has very mixed emotions. On the one hand, she is ecstatic. It is a healthy, good-looking baby boy. On the other hand, the mother screams in horror. Ah! Because the baby comes out looking exactly like our wonderful Rabbi Jack. A good-looking baby, but comes out with a beard and a kippah, the most Jewish-looking child you've ever seen in life, doing Jewish things morning, afternoon, evening, very highly involved in his religion, culture, heritage, all through life. Hypothetically, somebody like that, what would the line look like on a graph like that? Well, we said low involvement, middle involvement. So a person like that, hypothetically, is highly involved all the way through life, right? High horizontal line. People get the idea? Let's say someone was born Jewish. I said he was good-looking. No offense, right? It's okay. Okay. So someone was born Jewish, never knew they were Jewish, never consciously did one Jewish thing their entire lives. What's the line going to look like? Horizontal low. Someone grows up in a family that's very religious, but for whatever reasons, their own choices, friends, doubts, they start dumping religion step by step. What's the line going to look like? Negative slope, declining. Final example, someone grows up in a family with little Jewish knowledge or practice. They start getting more and more into it as they go through life. What's the line going to look like? Positive slope. Everybody get the idea? Round of applause for our first volunteer. Thank you very much. Thanks for being a good sport, man. Okay, so listen, there's 8 billion people on planet Earth. We all do our own things. There's no set patterns. Everybody has choices. And there's a million different versions and variations. That's all true. That being said, social research exists and there are patterns. Some things are much more common than other things. There are certainly some people that are highly involved in their particular religion, whether it's Catholicism or Protestantism or a level of Jewish, throughout. But what most people today are not highly involved in their, what percentage of people are highly involved in their religion their entire lives, right? What, 10%, 20%? Look in the modern world. It's probably not more than that. There are certainly people who go down, happens. Certainly people who go up, happens. I think a lot of people are kind of low to medium and we stay in our comfort zones. We just that all those things exist. I want to share with you now, though, what is the single most common timeline. I want to be very clear. There are variations to this, and there are exceptions to this. No absolutes. But I think you'll recognize it. The research is actually based on Catholics and Protestants, and whatever. It's also true for Jews, even more so. I'll give Jewish examples because that's who we are, but you could flip it and do a different religion. Jewish examples. Almost all little Jewish boys on their 8th day of life have a bris, circumcision, right? Almost all little Jewish girls have some kind of ceremony welcoming her to the Jewish community in different subsets, in different groups of Jews, at different traditions as to what you call it. A simchat bat, baby naming, a britah, a kiddush. Raise your hand if you had some kind of Jewish holiday celebrations when you were a kid. Passover or Hanukkah, wow, amazing. Look around the room, guys. If you didn't, you can always learn more and do more and make your own choice, that's great. But isn't that amazing? Even in 2025, in assimilated America, right, the vast majority of people had some holidays. Even better question. Raise your hand if you had a bar or bat mitzvah when you were 12 or 13 years old. Beautiful. Again, if you didn't, you can always decide to do it later. It's beautiful. But isn't that incredible? With all of the doomsaying, with all of the problems, the vast majority, wherever I go and ask these questions, the vast majority of Jewish youth are having some kind of holidays growing up, some kind of life cycle events. When you had your bar bat mitzvah, I'm almost sure you didn't walk into temple and say, give me presents, right? You have to prepare a speech, learn to read the Torah, whatever. There's something going on. At that first period of life, birth till 12, 13, it's a moderate to high identity. Some people skyrocket, some people nothing, but most people are having some life cycle events. I know it has to be better. I know the education is strong, but it's there. There's an identity there. There's a story about a rabbi and a priest taking a walk. And the priest is complaining about mice in his church. He says, Rabbi, you ever have mice in your synagogue? The rabbi says, yes, but we got rid of them. How'd you get rid of them? Well, one Saturday morning, got all the mice into synagogue, gave them all bar and bat mitzvahs. They never set foot in synagogue again. One of those cute little stories the rabbi says, and it is so true. Once mid-teens to late teens hit, religious cultural connection plummets. Think about it. If you had to choose, on the whole, you're here right now, so there's obviously beautiful exceptions, and it's great. But if you had to choose on the whole, what is the least religious time in an average person's life? A decade or so. Isn't it? Late teens and 20s? This is my time for me. My parents are not forcing anything on me. I'm not yet settled down with my own family. I don't want to be shackled by religion. I want to get out, have fun, explore, right? Most people are not that involved. First period of life, most people have moderate to high identity. Exceptions and variations, but that's the norm. Most go down, not so connected in their late teens and 20s. And then something fascinating happens in the 30s. People get reconnected. I want to be very clear. Sometimes it only happens in the 40s or the 50s. Sometimes, God forbid, there's an October 7th and it happens in the 20s. But people get reconnected usually in their 30s. Typical person goes through 3 stages in terms of their connection to who they are. Starts mid to high, goes low in the second stage, goes back high in the 30s. By the way, why do you think people get re-involved in their 30s, for the most part? Number one, having kids. Having children changes everything. Things you ran away from for years, you start running back to. Things that were never important to you suddenly become central to who you are. So when you're single, and even when you're newly married, it's really all about me. Suddenly you have a child, nothing's about me anymore. Suddenly, wow, I'm a link in a chain. Who is this person going to be? What am I passing on to them? I know a Jewish woman, very nice Jewish woman, married a very nice non-Jewish guy. They lived in a town from Chicago, lived in a town in the Midwest for 10 years, did nothing Jewish, no connection at all. And it's one of the most beautiful moments in life when the first child is born. And the doctor and nurse, they check it, they wrap it up, clean it, and they leave you alone for a few minutes. It's like a magic moment of life. It's wow, for new mother, new father, new child, we brought life into the world. We're like a real family. And this very nice Jewish lady says to her very nice non-Jewish husband, I'm raising this child to be a Jew. Surprise! It's what? You married me? We live here 10 years? She wasn't a mother then. When you're a parent, everything changes. That's the number one reason why people get re-involved. Other reasons, there's dozens of them, but different stage of life, you're obviously intelligent. After a while, most people come to the following conclusions. The parties were fun, enough already. You get it out. The traveling was interesting, but the 32 countries, you get it out of your system. You start looking for some community, depth, meaning. It's just a different stage of life. Also, God forbid, you get a little older and you start dealing with sickness, death, dying. It brings people home. Those are some of the main reasons. A lot of other ones. Whatever the typical person goes through 3 stages. Starts to mid-high connection. Teens and 20s, usually, people are not so interested. Beautiful exceptions to the rule here. By the way, you do realize that the fact that you're spending an evening here, that means you are destined to be super Jews. Just think about it. You guys didn't go all the way down, right? You care enough to be putting some time into this now, even before you have kids, you know what I'm saying? So, now here's the key question to understand this whole subject. In which of these 3 stages, kids till 12, 13, low, and then goes back high, in which of these 3 stages do we choose our marriage partner? It's ironic, isn't it? Almost by definition, it's the second stage. People say to me, why do you make such a big deal about interfaith dating and marriage, right? And they say, I don't have any problems. I've been living with this girl for 2 years. What's my answer? You're 26, you're 24, you're 22. Of course you don't have any. Why would it be an issue? I'm trying to add in two elements for you to think about. You make your own decisions in your own life, right? First thing we talked about, don't wait to be married to be happy. Happiness depends on me. Nobody's going to do it for you. The second subject, it sounds very different, but it's actually connected. Compatibility on many levels is crucial. It's easy to fall in love, relatively speaking. I'm going to say something a little bit, and I don't mean in any way to denigrate the difficulty of being single. I was 27 when I got married. In my crowd, like in the religious crowd, like that's pretty old, okay? I was single for a number of years dating. So I know it's hard. But that being said, you do realize it is much easier to get married than to stay married. If you're willing to settle, you can usually get married pretty easily. But are you marrying the right person? Are you in the right, is it going to work? So I'm not trying to help you tonight. I want to help you, so when you meet the person, it's the right person. Compatibility is crucial. Some of these things we do know. Like usually, you're going to try and go out with someone that is in your age range. Because we understand that in most cases, there might be exceptions to the rule. I get that, right? But usually, age range, within my father, Shalom, he was 5 years older than my mother. That's nothing. It's fine, right? My wife is actually 1 year older than me. It's nothing, right? But statistically speaking, once you get to a difference of more than, say, like 12, 15 years, like you're looking at problems, right? There's exceptions. I know the Persian community has men and women. I know there's exceptions. Okay, I get it. But the stats are pretty strong. Like make sure that you're compatible, because right now you're going to be fine, right? But in 5 years, are you going to be in the same place, right? Other types of compatibility that we know, geography, for instance. Okay, if I was going to set you up on a blind date, I described two candidates that you could go out with. Both sound amazing to you. You hear all about them. You're very interested. You see a photo. You're attracted to both. Everything, let's say theoretically on paper, they're equal top. You'd love to go out with both, right? I know it's impossible. Theoretically, they're all the same, right? There's only one difference. One lives in Southern California, and one lives in Wichita, Kansas. Assuming you have no family or love for Wichita, Kansas. I've been there, nice town. But again, if you're already in love with the person, you have there's a spark, there's chemistry, I get it. You don't just give that up so easily, right? But if you've never met either, who would you go out with first, right? Because we know, compatible, it's just going to be much easier, right? Practical things can make or break a marriage. This is my sort of pet peeve with how marriage is described. The love, it's the feelings, you meet each other. Like, of course you can meet somebody in a bar and have a spark and have chemistry and it turns into love. It happens every day. But are you destined to, are you likely to have a good marriage? You realize love and success in marriage they're not the same? So some of the compatibility things we kind of know. Some we're embarrassed to talk about. And religious compatibility, who you are. I'll put it like this. You don't have to like the same movies as your spouse. It's a plus. But you can finesse that. But who you are, and a part of you that gets more and more important as you get older, this became very clear post-October 7th. Because of what I do, I was privy to a lot. There's a Facebook group of Jewish women married to non-Jewish men post-October. There's an actual Facebook of hundreds since October 7th that are having real struggles in their relationships. Just think about it. The Jewish woman, again, I'm sure the flip also exists. I'm just not so privy to it. But in this case, the Jewish woman, she is shattered by what's been happening. I'm sure this is obvious to you, but in a way, I know people go October 7th itself was the horror of horrors, but in a way, some part of it was even worse. In a way, was the world's reaction to it. I don't mean physically. I'm not comparing but just the shock. So these Jewish women, they are torn apart, and the husbands are I'll just share snippets. So the husband is I don't understand. Russia invaded Ukraine. China is massacring the Uyghurs, I think is how you pronounce it, right? The Uyghurs, right? There's 12 major conflicts going on in Africa right now with massive numbers of people being killed. Sudan is one of the more famous, only one of them, right? So, and the non-Jewish guy is saying, why do you care about this? Why is this one all? Like, why is this any different? Try and explain that logically. It's who we are. We get it. And as someone once said, way before October 7th, this is actually in my book on the subject. Do you have a copy if people want, like, somewhere? Probably somewhere. I think Aish has one also, but I'm saying if you want the research and the stats, there is places to go for it. But there was a non-Jewish guy married a Jewish woman. The kids were being raised as Jews. He allowed the kids to be raised as Jews, right? So Jewish mom, Jewish kids, father's not Jewish. He said something beautiful. He said, I felt like a ship, like a boat, were leaving port going out to sea, and my wife and kids were on it, and I was stuck on shore. Meaning, that's not what marriage is supposed to be. You're lacking that. They say religion is supposed to bind a couple together. When there's two religions, or one is just not in it, it tears a couple apart. Many of you sense this. Many of us sense this. And I assume that this is part of the reason why many people are here and involved, which is great. I'm just trying to strengthen it and explain, like, this is logical and important. And so, like, double down on it. It used to be that the stereotype of intermarriage for American Jews was a Jewish guy finding a classic blonde hair, blue eyed wasp girl, right? That is no longer true. Men and women, Jewish men and Jewish women, now intermarry at roughly similar rates. It's a 3% difference. The main difference is in age. Jewish men tend to intermarry about 5 to 7 years younger than Jewish women. Meaning, Jewish women, there's exceptions and variations, of course, but it's interesting. Dr. Sylvia Bark-Fishman from Brandeis University did a major study on this. You can Google this. Jewish women generally feel they're looking for a Jewish guy, but clock starts ticking. They haven't met one, and so after a while, they give up. I can't set you up. I don't know people to set you up on dates. And you're here, so we're on the same page. What I'm trying to do is to emphasize how important this is. In my humble opinion, take it or leave it, right? You're adults. Like, what are the really important things in my life that I'm trying to accomplish? Well, I want to have physical health. I want to have some kind of financial plan, security moving forward, right? I mean, we all know that, like, money doesn't lead to happiness. I mean, we know that, right? I mean, statistically speaking, once you're at $75,000 to $85,000 a year, like the percent, like extra money does not really add any substantial or, according to some, any real happiness. But you do want to have a financial plan to be stable. It's an expensive city to live in, right? So this is responsible, right? I want to have I want to take care of my physical health. I want to be on some kind of career path, and I want to find somebody Jewish, right? Not anybody. I was once speaking in Chicago. A group of young professionals. A woman came up to me after the talk, and she said, listen, I agree with everything you're saying. The only problem is I don't like half the Jews that I meet. So my answer was, only half? I mean, come on, we're difficult people. We're not an easy people, right? That being said, there are so many different types of Jews. You have your bookworm Jews, and you have your athletic Jews, and you have your strumming a guitar, wearing a flowery dress, going in the forest Jews. You have everything. I mean, you're sitting here in LA. You could date a different Jewish person every night of the year for the next 5 years and never repeat. I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm just saying, like, the more active you are, coming to the Friday night dinners, doing the events, going a trip to Israel, going to all the stuff that you could possibly do, that's how you make it happen. And it's worth it. It's for that bond. And it's also like, I want to share this with my spouse. I want to pass this on to my kids. Not for the rabbis, not for history. I'm not talking for me. This is who I am, and I want my kids to share this. So let's summarize, and then I'm going to open it up to you for questions and comments. My premise, the whole idea of why I think about these things and what I'm trying to share, is that there is something fundamentally wrong with the Western world's message on relationships. I'm a big fan of modernity. I really am. I like my phone. I get off the phone. I get the rental car. I put my phone. I have GPS. It's great, right? And I even like the openness. It's not just technology. The openness of the world, the modern world, is great, right? But there's a few things that have been lost along the way. One of the things is this understanding of what makes marriage work. There is far too much focus, in my humble opinion, on love. I am not in any way saying you should marry somebody you don't have feelings for and love or coming to love. 100%. You need that chemistry. But that's not enough. We proved, remember the Beatles, all you need is love, and yet 5 years later, right, huge divorce rates, like almost everybody's in love when they get married. So what? So you need love, you need trust, communication. Those are obvious things everybody knows, right? I'm trying to add two things to the conversation. If there's even one little element of any of this that will help you, then it's worth our time together. The first thing, that's the idea of my eggs method. The principle behind the eggs method is no one is going to make me happy. If you're unhappy when you're single, you're unhappy when you're married, it comes back. Take ownership of your mental health, of your attitude. Become a happier, calmer, nicer person. And the good news is, this is not bad news. The good news is, this is really doable. Really doable. I've seen it in my own life, right? And everybody I know. I mean, you see this, and the research is unbelievable. Eggs, just to see, again, if you like the system, great. If not, create your own system. But just so you remember the main elements. E stands for? Exercise. G? Giving. G? Gratitude. S? Spirituality. Those elements, and do them in your own form, whatever, they make a huge difference. The second secret, the second element, the commonality is not to rely on love. That successful relationships don't just depend on love. You need love, but that's not enough. It's the idea of practical compatibility. And I want to explain how this fits in. Some of these things we know. We look for somebody that's our age. Very often you want somebody from a somewhat of a similar background, socioeconomic background, so they kind of fit with your lifestyle. Oh, that's good. We're embarrassed to talk about religion for some reason. It's like it sounds wrong. That's why I brought the African-American lawyer story. Like, it's nothing against anybody. And the compatibility issue is so crucial because in the hard times, you're together. This person gets me. We're on the same page. We're looking in the same direction. One story that I heard, just to end, and then we'll have your questions and comments. I heard this story about this guy named Paul, married to a woman named Liz. And Paul had always secretly suspected that Liz married him for his money. So one day, after a number of years of marriage, he sits down with his wife on the couch, and he says, Liz, tell me honestly, just please be honest with me. Did you marry me because my uncle left me $20 million? And Liz reacts immediately. Of course not. That's ridiculous. I don't care who left you the money. Meaning, like, why are we getting married? So, yes, part of it is love. We want those feelings. We share those feelings. It's that ultimate relationship. But I think, make your own, you're welcome to your own thoughts. And I think it's actually a lot deeper than that. I think that we sense that I want to build a life with somebody. I want to have a partner to go through life. I sense that there's like, I'm meant for something in this world, and I want to pass this on to children. Like, it's not just about love. It's about creating a permanent long-term bond. And the good news is that is possible. We don't just have to be statistics. Right? No guarantees in life. I get it. You can do everything right, and God forbid things go wrong. Right? It happens. But the amount of control we have is much greater than we think. So ladies and gents, that's what I wanted to share with you. Thank you so much for listening. It's been a pleasure. Anybody have any questions, comments, anything anybody wants to share? Please, Alvin.
Something I've experienced, I grew up Reformed.
Yeah.
And so my knowledge in depth of Hebrew and Judaism in general is probably not as intense as others. I have found that to be an issue.
I love this question. Okay.
So how do I deal with that?
Yep.
Obviously, I'm trying to invest more
Great.
here.
Can I answer that before you get to the second part?
Yeah.
Because that's a huge one of itself. What Calvin just asked is I'm going to rephrase it, but I think I'm going to tell me if I'm getting it wrong. Yeah. Basically, okay, let's say you're on the same page. People are on the same page. Yes, I do get it. I do want to marry somebody Jewish. But what about different levels of Judaism, different types of different denominations, right? I get three versions of this question. One is the exact version you said, quote unquote, like more observant, less observant. I don't mean that like better or worse. I'm just saying factually, practically, whatever. The second version of the question that I get is American marrying Israeli. Again, it's a parallel question. Both Jews, but different types of Jews. The third version of the question I get, is Ashkenazi marrying Sephardi. Okay? Both Jews, but two different types of Jews. Let me start with this last one because it's my favorite. Let's be honest, guys. So you marry Sephardi, you get better food and better music. Okay? No problem. For 99.9% of people, there's really no problem. Like, what's the big deal? I mean, all the core stuff is the same. You know what I'm saying? Okay. American marrying Israeli. So I got to tell you, I've been living in Israel for 30 years, far longer than I lived in Canada growing up. To this, and I speak Hebrew. My kids are full Israelis, and I have many Israeli friends. That being said, to this day, at least 75, even more, 80% of my close friends are Americans. And I know exactly why. Because I want to be able to mention Star Trek in a conversation, and my friends understand what I'm saying. Okay, I'm not saying not to marry Israeli or American. It's perfectly fine. It works great. It means go slower. There's a bigger cultural difference than we realize. It's not automatic. I'm not saying no at all. I'm saying yes. Just go a little slower, Very often, like, American marries into an Israeli family, and, like, the Israeli family, every Friday night they're together. Very common, right? The Americans are like, what do you, like, I'm going to see my mother-in-law every Friday night? It's like, yeah. I'm just different. Like, no, there's not a no here, but it just goes slower. Those are preludes. Those are, like, to your question. So I got to be honest. Would I set up on a blind date a strictly Orthodox Jew with a unaffiliated or Reformed Jew who is not interested? Like, leave me alone. I'm happy who I am, right? No way. Why? You got 100,000 people. You could date 100,000 people. Why look? If they're already dating and they're not so far apart. My wife is a very talented person in many ways. She teaches dance, teaches yoga. She's also a fine artist. So she drew our wedding ketubah, or, like, I don't know if you've seen these, a wedding contract. It's like, technically it's like a legal thing, but it's like quite a beautiful tradition of the husband's obligation to the wife. And she also drew our, for when we got married, she also drew our wedding invitations and our birkonim. How would you say birkonim? The prayers after the meal, like the benching. And in all of them, it had like a monogram of our names, and it had an image of the chatan and kala, image of the bride and groom. And only later did I notice that on all three of those, she drew me as Hasidic. I'm a religious Jew. I'm not Hasidic. I wasn't then, and I'm not now, right? I mean, she drew me with, like, the long coat, the long beard, the hat, because my wife is like, I mean, like, you think I look religious? I mean, she's like Hasidic, like Strog. I mean, she's like dancing and singing, and she's like amazing, right? In a great way, all positive, right? You don't have to be the same as your spouse. You really don't. But you do need to be going in the same direction. So I think much more important than, I'm like this and she's like that, it's like, okay, but, like, are you both sort of, do you vision a life together? Are you moving in the same, if you're both growing and you're learning and you're interested and you're going generally in the same direction, it can be a beautiful thing to go together. On the other hand, we got to be honest that if it's a really big difference and only one of the people is interested in sort of growing in the other direction, whichever direction it might be, then you have a problem. I would also say that it really depends a lot if you've already met the person. If you've met somebody that is Jewish and you have a strong connection and chemistry with them, you don't give up on that so easily. Does that help? No? Great. Any questions, comments, anything else anybody wants to share?
Yeah, I have a question.
Please.
You talked about happiness.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the difference between, in a relationship and before a relationship, what's the difference between happiness and joy?
It's a great question. His question was, what is the difference between happiness and joy? So there was a French film called Les Amants, The Lovers, that was brought over to America. It was, like, redone, an American version or dubbed or whatever, and it came in 1954. It went up to the Supreme Court because at the time it was accused of being pornographic. Now, this is 1954, okay, which means that it probably showed, like, a woman's shoulder for like 3 seconds, okay? It's not like today's standards, okay? And it went up to the Supreme Court, and there was a famous line. You might have heard this line. Justice Potter Stewart said, they were trying to say, okay, well, what is pornography? You can't define it, and he said a famous line. He said, I may not be able to define it, the word pornography, like what it is, but I know it when I see it, and this isn't it, right? So that's my answer in terms of happiness. I'm actually writing a book right now on happiness. I'm actually doing, I hope to do two versions of it. One, a Jewish version, and one just a general mainstream kind of version. The Jewish version I call the struggle for simcha, the English version of the struggle for happiness, because I believe it is a struggle if you don't understand what it is, right? And what I found in my research is that there is even all the positive psychology, all the things that I find, there's no definition of happiness that's agreed upon by the researchers. After 30 years of massive investment in academia, there is no definition of happiness. That being said, I think we all know if we're happy. I mean, I think joy, on the other hand, is very different. Okay, I'll give you a very simple example. Okay, right now, I'm actually quite happy, but I'm not joyous. On a happiness scale right now, just personally speaking, I'm probably 8.5, 9. You know, had a great day. Went over to the Maluls, had a little nap, got ready for the talk, had a nice dinner, met some nice people. I'm going home, after I've been on the road for a few weeks, I'm going home on Sunday, going back on the El Al flight on Sunday, going back home. Like, I'm happy, like I'm doing great, you know? Am I joyous right now? Not joyous at all. I think that's the difference. I don't think the goal is joy. Sometimes, when you're at a wedding, when you're out with a party with friends, a simcha of some kind, you know, great. But joy is fleeting and rare, relatively rare. Happiness should be the norm. Remember that teaching when I told you about Reb Walken, my teacher, when he said the flying altitude, right? That's a fundamental teaching. Most of the time, you should be happy. You deserve to be happy. God wants you to be happy. By the way, not always, okay? People in the first, obviously October 7th itself, but even in the time, like if you're paying attention to what's happening and you're constantly happy, I think there's something wrong with your sensitivity buttons over here, you know? But human beings are not meant to be depressed. We can't function. Right? So does that help you at all, the difference?
The energy.
The externality is how I'm thinking of it. I think joy overflows, and it's almost impossible if you're joyous that others see that. You don't have to be smiling to be happy. It can help, it's great, you know, but it's not, that's the way I look at it. Again, there's no clear definitions.
Joy is more like a moment, whereas happiness is like a general state of, general state.
Content was a good word. Content and happy is how I'm saying those as synonymous. Very well, thank you. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, I want to leave you with one idea. If just to share with you. My experience when I deal with the subject, I used to give, I still do, give two different areas. One, like happiness, completely separate topic, and relationships and dating and intermarriage and things like that, right? And I found over the years that like, it's all the same idea. It sounds very different, but if you think about it deeply, it's that like, it's not just about love. It's about, my own inner state and my compatibility with the person, right? So they're similar ideas, right? Many people, not assuming anything, take it or leave it, but many people after it will sort of say to me that, listen, I tend to agree with you. I'd like to marry, somebody Jewish when I'm ready to settle down, but haven't met anybody. And, I'm 24, I'm 25, I'm 19, I'm not getting married tomorrow. So I'll just go and play the field and have fun. And when I'm ready to settle down, I'll find a nice Jewish guy, a nice Jewish girl, right? I just want to address it for a minute. Number one, you never know when you're going to fall in love. And what do you do then? Formative moment for me. I was speaking at like a youth conference years and years ago, and we talked about this subject, and there was a guy sitting there, couldn't have been more than 18 or 19 years old. I think he may be even 17 or 18. And he's sitting there with his non-Jewish girlfriend. Right beside each other, very clear, open, fine, I respect you, respect me. Like, it's just sharing information, do what you want in life. It's not, it's not my life, it's your life. I'm just, So, and he said something fascinating. He said, well, if it gets too serious, I'll call it off. My heart, and first of all, there's a room with like 30 or 35 people in the room, and my heart, and anybody with a heart was like, this poor woman, like, what do you, like, all eyes are like, and then first of all, everybody looks at her, obviously, and then you're like, I can't look at her. Like, I mean, you gotta make a feel. It was like, what do you do? Like, what do you look? What do you? So it took me like a second to like realize, like, so you're telling me that when you don't really care about a person, you'll date them, but if you start to really care, you're gonna call it off. Like, how do you feel? To put that into a more common modern, okay? So like, if you're dating somebody that you really don't think you should marry, in your heart of hearts, you just know this is not the right person for you. Like, don't answer this question, but like, just think for yourself. Do you feel good about being with that person? I am not saying that dating and marriage like always go together. In the community that I'm part of, which I love, not perfect, but I love, dating and marriage go very much together. You only start dating when you're ready to get married. And you're only dating for marriage, right? In the West, in the modern world, I get it. Like, it could be like years of, I get it's not like automatic. But if you know this is not the person you want to marry, do you really feel good about being with them? Like, I mean, just in terms of, what about their feelings? Well, I told her I'd only marry somebody Jewish. Yeah, and then you lived with her for 2 years. Like, we Jews don't even understand, like, how our feelings come back. Something happens and, like, and a non-Jew is supposed to, that's number one. You never know when you're going to fall in love. Number two, let's say this isn't a person, right? Statistically speaking, National Jewish Population Surveys from 2011, this is even before the Pew studies, found that 92% of the Jews that intermarry in their early 30s, right, like that marry a non-Jew in their early 30s, 92% of them were dating non-Jews in their early 20s. Again, people who intermarried in their early 30s were dating non-Jews. We all know that 90% of them is not the same person, right? 90% of people are not marrying their college sweetheart. So what happens? You fall into a pattern, right? It's just like, oh, when I get serious, I'll start dating. I mean, it's once you start dating people from a different background, human nature, we all get used to like downplaying our own Jewishness so that the commonality will be stronger, there'll be less problems. You get used to, and after a while, you just like forget it was even that important. The example that I like to give, guy named David from, traditional Jewish home, strong conservative Jewish home. He graduates high school. When he graduates high school, you say, David, what are the chances you're going to marry somebody else who's Jewish? And he laughs at you. He says, are you kidding? I'm the most Jewish kid that I know. I've been to Camp Ramah every summer of my life. I've been to Israel twice. I did March of the Living. My grandparents are Holocaust survivors. 100% chance I'm marrying somebody else who's Jewish. But then David gets a scholarship, full ride, Anchorage, Alaska for 4 years of college. Nice town, I assume, few Jews. So he's dating non-Jews for 4 years. Ask him the same question after 4 years. He won't even remember how important it was. Because the more you get involved, the more we change, the more priorities change, and you lose yourself. And then, 10 years later, it's like one very last anecdote, true. My first talk I ever gave on the subject. It was before I did all my research into the happiness stuff, so it was just to talk on compatibility, with religion being one of the main things, not the only thing. And I'm speaking in my hometown, Montreal, Canada. Woman comes to the talk, after we have questions and answers, she comes up to the front, and we're there with her 16-year-old daughter. And she makes it very clear, she's Jewish, it was clear, her daughter's Jewish, the father was not. And she turns to me and she says, I want you to hear this. And she turns to her 16-year-old daughter and she says, I love your father, he's a good man. If you do what I did, I'll kill you. True story. Because she knew that she fell in love with him and he was a good person. I'm not what do you mean? But she gave something up very important. So my encouragement is on both of these issues, taking ownership of your own well-being, your own happiness, and Judaism teaches in dating to lead with the head. The heart is there. That's the matchmaker, shadchanim system. I'm not saying you have to go through a formal system, but understand the wisdom. The wisdom of it is, before you fall for somebody, you make sure they're on the same page. That's the whole system. That's what it's for. Works very well. Not perfect, but incredibly well. Take the principle of that system, right? Which means make sure the person is right for you in all ways. And then, right, when the heart clicks, you have everything. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming and staying. Thank you very much. Glad to meet anybody. Thank you very much to Aishlit, to Rabbi Jack, to Shira for inviting me. It's a pleasure.